Clemson Bias hit us up, totally unbiased, from Clemson, South Carolina. Listen to this question. He said, you mentioned portal regret for the approaches leading up to FSU versus Clemson. What if the opposite happens? What if Clemson benefits from the continuity and development of high school recruits while FSU struggles with a team full of free agents? Great question. It's a huge story right now in the ACC. It's going to be a huge story nationally. So, Meemaw once famously said, there's several ways to hoe a row. And some folks tried to silence her. They thought she was spewing inappropriosity. She's not. It's a gardening reference. Like, come, I mean, have you people lost your way so much that you haven't ever hoed a row? Like, come on now. Who's amongst us hasn't hoed a row or two? Well, if you prefer skin the cat, then there are multiple ways to skin the cat. But what we're talking about here is different ways to put a roster together. So in college football, there are a few things that are just the way, things that are non-negotiables, things you have to do. You got to be good enough on the line of scrimmage. You got to be good enough at quarterback. And that doesn't mean insane arm talent. That means good decision-making, poise, minimum baseline of accuracy, stay out of prison, those sorts of things. You can't be losing the turnover game week after week. You got to be pretty good on special teams. These things you have to do. But then there are other things that are optional. They're negotiable, in other words. And there are different ways you can put a roster together. There are different things you can emphasize. There are different styles of play you can have, different offenses you can run. One of the biggest sublayers in college football right now, and one of the biggest talking points the week of this game, about a month and a half or so from now, is going to be transfer portal versus transfer portal denier. And you've got one team here in Florida State. Mike Norvell's lived in the portal, and then Dabo Swinney is totally allergic to it. And yet, Clemson's favored by 3 in their home building, which pretty much means odds makers are saying, these are even teams in our book. Have at it. Here's 3 points for home field advantage. It's a referendum game. I don't think it should be necessarily, but it's going to be viewed that way. Like Clemson could win this thing 30-27, and their fans will go, told you so. And if the opposite is true, and FSU wins it by 3, they will burn it down up there in Clemson. We would have won this game if we had just gone in the portal a little bit, like this guy, Mike Norvell, did. So it is so drastic, the difference in these two approaches. Norvell, since he got to Florida State, has taken 46 kids out of the portal, and in that same time frame, Dabo's taken 2. I think they've both been backup quarterbacks. So they have not used the portal at all. Which way is right? Do you have a thought on this, by the way? Which way is right? Because I think it's somewhere in between. Now, if I was Norvell, I'd do exactly what he's done. Like if you're not going to give me a whole lot of rope, but you want me to rebuild a program, I'm going to do what Lincoln Riley's done. I'm going to do what Deion's done. I'm going to do what Hugh Freeze has done. I'm going to do what Mike Norvell did. I'm going to use every available talent acquisition mechanism at my disposal. That's what I'm going to do. Dabo disagrees. Dabo Swinney, to make it very clear to you, has voluntarily ignored the transfer portal. Well, he's not ignored it. He has not gone shopping in the transfer portal, nearly to the degree that anyone else has. So let's just say there's a world where FSU goes into Death Valley and wins this year, the regular season game. I don't know. They may rematch for all I know. But let's say they were to go in there. I'm very curious how Dabo Swinney would handle that, because I know what the talk would be, but he's the head coach there. He doesn't have to participate in that. But remember this time last year, for those who think that he would be resolute and steadfast and never change, what he had elevated, I think, Streeter to offensive coordinator this time last year. I was critical of it. I'm hardly ever critical of personnel decisions because I don't know what goes into them. So it's really kind of dumb of me to criticize them. But I thought I knew enough about the move at Clemson. I thought Dabo just dug his heels in and thought that they were a little bit different over there, and therefore they could elevate anyone because the Clemson culture would be the wind and the sails that carried them to whatever finish line they were aiming for. That wasn't the case. They weren't good enough. That was not as good an offensive coordinator hire as he could have had. And he was steadfast in it. Well, guess what? He fired the guy 1 year in, and he goes and gets the highest profile, hottest name on the market in Garrett Riley and brought him in. Well, that's a reversal of thinking on Dabo's part. Now, I credit him. You could criticize him, but if he hit the dump button 1 year in, that's hard to do. Plus, there's an immense pride thing there. That wasn't done in the shadows. They failed on very, very like big platforms, white hot spotlight. That's not easy to do. So I credit him for doing it. Well, if that were to happen this year and Mike Norvell and Florida State win the ACC, I think Dabo Swinney would rethink some things. It would be a dereliction of your duty at that point not to. Once again, this is not a case where everyone who is using the portal is crashing and burning and has 47 internal issues that you're absolving yourself from. Some of them are doing great. In this scenario, Florida State would be doing great. You really think that fan base, or that coaching staff for that matter, is going to look and say, so these dudes in Tallahassee have the same access to the pool of talent we do. We're just choosing to ignore it because of a principle or a value that, while it's admirable we stick to it, doesn't really have to be adhered to. There's another way we can do this, and we don't sacrifice our morals whatsoever. It's not detrimental to the program if we take the same guys out of the portal based on the same characteristics we use to take guys out of high school. Why would you ignore that wholesale? And I'm not saying bring 13 or 14 of them per cycle in, but if you don't think 3 or 4 kids per cycle could be a big difference in a game like this at Clemson, you're crazy. Think about what, I'm not saying they could have had him, but I'm saying think about what going and competing for a Keon Coleman out of Michigan State would have done for the Clemson wide receiver room. Well, instead, he's in Tallahassee, so you're going to have to play against him this year. It doesn't make sense to me. It makes sense. I understand where Dabo's head is. I don't necessarily think it would be my approach. And so if they win 48-17 this year, who cares? Moot point. Dabo dunked on the nation again. If it doesn't turn out that way, I think there would be some rethinking there. That's how I think that would play out.